Thank you for listening to the ThePPod from the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. Please note, due to the nature of this podcast, themes relating to the abuse and neglect of children are discussed, with the content being designed for an adult audience for educational purposes in order to protect children from harm. Therefore, listener discretion is advised and the content unsuitable for children.
Welcome to the ThePPod.
Right then, welcome back to the ThePPod, the partnership podcast from the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. Now, today's theme is around exploitation, and we have previously done an episode with Chloe Deverell, the child exploitation lead for the county, around the topic. But today we're really keen to get stuck in around actually what does that look like in practice, and who and what are the specialist teams to be able to support when there are concerns of child sexual exploitation and criminal exploitation as well. So I'm really pleased to have two people from the PEXT team join me in the studio today, which is the Preventing Exploitation team, which is a relatively newly sort of formed team. So we thought today we'd talk to you about what that actually looks like, what the team does, how they work, how they actually operate in practice to help prevent concerns around exploitation, and also talk about trauma-informed practice and how that kind of fits into all the work they do. So can I just ask you guys to introduce yourselves to start off with?
Hello. I'm Alyssa Belcher and I'm the family support worker in the Preventing Exploitation team. So my role is working with families of young people that have been exploited.
And I'm Jo Burt. I'm the lead social worker for the Preventing Exploitation team. So I work in more of a consultation role, providing CE consultations, attending strategy meetings and SIN-ROF plans. And then I also manage our prevention service, which is 3 workers that we have that work along the same level as our family intervention service within the council.
Lovely, thank you. So with that, and in terms of the team then, could either of you kind of explain what is the team? How big is the team? Where does it sit? And then we'll sort of get on, if we can, into more about what the actual work that you do is, if that's okay.
Okay, so our team's grown quite quickly. A year ago, we were 2 social workers and 1 young people's support worker. And then from May this year, we now have 2 young people's support worker. We have 1 parenting support worker. We have 3 prevention workers. We have a lead social worker, a team manager. We also commission a service from St Giles, and they will work with our young people that are at high risk of exploitation. And then we also have an agreement with SASP, where they will work directly with, we've got space for 12 young people that are at risk of exploitation, and their work along the sports mentoring with them. So we've grown really quickly, and everybody's at capacity, so it shows the need for the service in Somerset.
And that sits within the structure of children's social care?
Yeah, so within children's social care, so our 2 young people support workers will work alongside social workers to provide direct work. And that can be young people that are open on a SIN-ROF plan, a child protection plan, or CLA. Then we have a parenting support worker that again works alongside families that are open to social workers. Then we have 3 prevention workers, which will work just the step below children's social care. So that's young people that are really vulnerable to exploitation. We're trying to get in there really early, work as a whole family, but try and do that direct work. And the need has to be primarily exploitation.
And when we're talking about exploitation, are we talking about child criminal exploitation primarily, or child sexual exploitation, or do you find sort of within the team you get a real mix?
Yeah, so everything really. We've seen young people that are subject to sort of fraud claims, that are being exploited to complete fraud in terms of using paying a certain amount and using other people's credit cards and using that to spend money and gain things. We've seen young people that have been groomed in terms of one young person is really good at sort of IT, and that's a real skill for him. And he was being paid to hack into people's IP addresses and supply the groomers with their home address to use for threatening purposes. We've seen criminal exploitation and serious youth violence, and that's often in the buying and selling of illegal substances. And then sexual exploitation. We've seen sort of grooming gangs but out of county that have groomed some of our young people within Somerset, and then also a lot of online abuse that's taken place.
Just out of curiosity, do you see more of that online abuse kind of increasing over time? I'm just kind of wondering, just curious about that, whether you are seeing that or not particularly.
I wouldn't say it's an increasing. I mean, it's just one of those things that is really prevalent through the whole of being a child in the UK today. But I think that most of the cases that I work with parents, it's the abuses from people that the young people know in the community or people that they've met through friends. So I wouldn't say that that's an increase in the work that I do.
So it tends to be more that those young people who have that direct contact with other young people.
Yes, or adults.
Right.
So not just young people. And starting a new school, having those new friendship groups, meeting, I suppose with the sexual exploitation, it's more with social media, where it's a friend of a friend that knows somebody, but they're generally in Somerset and they will go and meet them within Somerset rather than outside of Somerset.
Right.
It makes it easier to cross county lines, doesn't it, really? Through the use of Snapchat, it just broadens they're just more accessible to being groomed. But also if they're in situations where they are selling substances, we see that going across areas that we work into and then going across borders into Devon, Dorset and Wiltshire just with ease, really, which we probably wouldn't have seen a few years ago.
Thank you. If it's okay, I'm just thinking actually it'd be good to come back and look at that in a minute, about that sort of cross-border work and also kind of the work that you do with wider multi-agency partners. But before we get into that, I'm just wondering, so we talked about sort of young people engagement workers, if I got that right. And then also you mentioned about the parent sort of workers. And Alyssa, I believe you're kind of the sort of the parent side of things.
I am. So I work with parents that are already known to children's social care and also Fizz. Actually, I've had a couple come through as through Fizz just to go and give some information and guidance to parents. So my role is to work with the parents to try and support them in giving information about exploitation, grooming, county lines, online safety, and trying to support them to be able to care for their child that's been through a traumatic event. And that can be, mostly it's from risk outside the home. So you're working with parents that may have never had any contact with children's social care before and don't know how it all works, have never had social workers involved, and it's really scary, quite overwhelming. So it's about helping them and supporting them through that and kind of talking to them about how they can be a more trauma-informed parent and support their child through that trauma that they've had, especially if it's, you know, something that is completely alien to them.
How do you find sort of parents in terms of your work? Do you find they're quite receptive to you sort of contacting them and talking to them, or?
So they don't have to work with me. They get the option of having me to support them. So I normally find that parents are more open because they want to know the information, they want to make those changes. Some parents aren't necessarily as open. I think parents who've had involvement with children's social care before are a little bit more cagey about what my role is, because I'm obviously asking them to talk about quite a lot of quite personal things for them if there's stuff that's going on in the family that has impacted on the child or whatever's happened. But I find that having lots of empathy and talking to them, and I think after they've met with me for a couple of times, they realise that I'm not scary and I'm not a social worker. And that's been my in with a lot of the parents actually that have had children's social care involvement before. They're like, I don't like social workers. Everyone's against me. So after meeting and they realise that I'm not there for that purpose and that I'm there for them and to talk to them and to give them personal advice and guidance that can actually genuinely help them and their children, they're more receptive.
And in terms of the children, young people that typically as a service, as a team, you kind of work with, what do you sort of see what sort of ages are we talking about? Is it kind of right the way across the spectrum, or older teenagers, or is it a bit of a mix?
So the youngest person in Somerset who we've supported who's been at high risk of exploitation was 6 years old.
Wow.
That's a picture that we know is happening nationally. I think probably we didn't think it would happen in Somerset, but it did. And I think he's moved areas now and those risks are still there. And just like incredibly, incredibly vulnerable. I'd say for our prevention service, our average age is probably 13, 14. I think for our young people that are open to children's social care, I think it's more sort of 15, 16, 17. And when they're 17, that makes that transition really difficult because I think other services view them as approaching adulthood. So that's really difficult to sort of get on board and for them to be seen as a victim and maybe get the services that they deserve to safeguard them. So we're constantly advocating for that to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the kind of families you typically work with, is there a typical family?
No, there's never a typical family. All families are unique. And I work with all backgrounds, young families that have had contact with children's social care before and some that have never had anything at all and, hardworking families. And I think that's the thing with exploitation is that people expect it to be vulnerable young people who are in care or parents don't care about them. And that's not the case at all. These exploiters are just so clever in how they involve that. And they know the ins, they can see it through these children that they meet in all different ways. So it's really hard as a parent. You can put in all those protections and a lot of the parents are like, I did this, I don't know how it happened. But they'll get in somehow if they see an in. So it is quite overwhelming for a lot of the parents because they just don't know how it happened.
So that kind of stereotypical view of what we might imagine, that unconscious bias of this is what a child or young person who is exploited looks like, or this is their circumstances, actually is not.
No, not at all.
Thank you. So, we sort of talked about the sort of work you do, and you mentioned sort of some of the issues that you see coming up. Do you kind of do you see any sort of particular themes that come through quite a lot? I suppose two things. Where would you sort of typically get referrals coming from? I guess originally, and for what sort of things that tend to come through for you?
So referrals received into our prevention service are either from schools or police reports. That's normally the same into our children's social care services. Quite often police reports, quite often these young people aren't known to us, and then we will find out that they've been arrested for possession with intent to supply, Class A drugs, found with money on them, found with multiple phones. And then that's our sort of first point of getting involved. Sometimes young people have been known to us historically. The link between children that have grown up in homes who experience domestic abuse and then the children that are being exploited is massive. I haven't got any sort of direct numbers for you, but if I think of our prevention referrals, I would say, at a guess, probably about 85% of those referrals have a link with domestic abuse that they've suffered within their home.
I think there's a lot of missing as well. So especially if social workers, from my point of view, if they've come in through social worker referral, sometimes these children, they haven't committed any crimes, but they've just been missing for 2 or 3 times, and the parents don't understand why. They have never seen any signs because the signs are just not there with exploitation unless you're really looking and you really know them. So I think that comes through as well, where there's been social worker called because the child has gone missing for quite a few times.
And is that just out of interest, is that what you kind of see quite often, as maybe there have been things taking place for a period of time but quite covertly?
Yeah.
But it's only when things start to become more visible,
yes,
like sort of school exclusions or being arrested for possession of drugs or something, or going missing, but by that point actually there's already been quite a lot going on below the surface for some time.
For that child, they've had and this is how grooming works, because those exploiters are really clever at how they do that. And it can take a day, a week, sometimes it can take months or years for exploiters to groom the child for whatever means that they want them for. So it can be so slight that the parents don't recognise it. But also you've got that that teenagers are being teenagers. So a lot of the behaviour parents just think is, oh, they're just being a teenager, or they just want to be with their friends all the time, or they want to have their phone all the time because that's what teenagers do. So as a parent as well, it's very difficult if your child is shouting at you and, you're having those arguments. That's what a normal, I say in air quotations. Yeah, it's just for some parents, especially if you're working, you've got other children in the home, you've got other things going on. It's very hard sometimes to really see what's going on with your child, which is why trauma-informed parenting is so useful, because it helps you to see in a different way that you may have not already been doing before.
Yeah, definitely. And well, if it's okay, it'll be great to kind of talk about the sort of trauma-informed approach that you do as a team in a moment, if that, because I think, it's something that I'd be really interested to sort of talk about what that actually looks like in practice within your team, within your service, because I know that's really at the core of what you do, isn't it?
Yeah.
But before we do, I'm just wondering, you mentioned a moment ago, Jo, about sort of working across borders and that being really key to the work that you do. Are you able to kind of talk about some of the work, obviously not specifics, but some of the work you might do with kind of any of our neighbouring authorities or wider?
Yeah, so we have regular meetings with the counties that we border. So we will meet with their safeguarding leads, their exploitation leads, and we will have regular meetings of any sort of hotspots that maybe young people are congregating. I was contacted by Dorset Children's Social Care the other week because a lot of young people were associating around a train station, but it was very on the border of Somerset and Dorset. So they were just letting me know that was happening. So if we had any young people missing, that was a potential place. We also have a support group that's run by the University of Durham that enables every practitioner in the Southwest to come together and to share experiences. This is quite a new form of practice. As we know, the Children's Act that we sort of have to work towards is quite dated. It doesn't talk about exploitation. It doesn't talk about social media. There's no legal framework that we work within. So a lot of the time we're going from experience, we're going from things that we've seen and we're learning as we go. So that gives us a really good tool to share really good practice with our colleagues, but then also widens that safeguarding. We also have a lot of young people that are looked after in different counties that are then placed in Somerset, and vice versa. We place young people in different counties. So we try and build those relationships then. So even if we know it's just a name of somebody we can contact, or they have, like myself or their team manager's name that they can contact, that we can always ensure we're sharing information. That can be quite difficult with the police because I think they work on sort of different systems. But I know when we have young people that go missing, that goes over different forces. And then if we share sort of missing prevention plans or trigger plans that we would write with young people that are missing quite a lot, we can share them with the different police in those areas. So we know that that used to be a really good loophole for people that were exploiting children. They take them over the border and it's sort of difficult for professionals to understand what's happening. But I think we've really learned that and we're trying to work closer together to prevent that.
And obviously, you mentioned the police there, but obviously I guess in the work that you do, you work with agencies from across the board. And what sort of teams or people do you normally kind of work with?
So with the police, we have close relationships with Operation Topaz, who is the exploitation department of the police. We work with Remedy, who is the team in the police who is sort of the drugs team. So they look at a lot of county lines. And I know they've worked recently where they find young people that have been reported missing from different counties, and they find them in sort of trap houses and drug houses within the county. Education, we try and build really good relationships with schools, especially with the partnership schools and the PRUs in the areas, and just be able to, even if it's a known person that we can speak to and they can speak to us. Within all our meetings, we have to work in a multi-agency way. It's the only way we're going to safeguard children from exploitation. So we want to make sure there's always a really good multi-agency plan made for the child, and then that just strengthens relationships all the time. So it's something we're really conscious and really keen to make really strong in Somerset.
No, definitely. And I know, Joe, before sort of coming into this role that you're in now, when you used to work in Fizz, you've really had quite a lead around exploitation. And I remember some of the work that you did around sort of working with park wardens and that kind of wider community, and sometimes sort of burger van owners and that sort of thing, isn't it? So I think sort of moving away from that traditional sort of understanding about who we work with when we've got concerns around exploitation, and really kind of expanding that out around actually who's within the communities and who may be seeing these young people or picking up on these signs or just being able to have those eyes, ears, that support is really key around this.
Absolutely. Children's social care and the police are often the last people to know that these children are being exploited. So to really have those good relationships is vital. And especially with education, they will see a child for probably about 30 hours a week, day in, day out, know that child better than anybody. So they're going to be able to spot those signs more than any of us can.
The other thing I wanted to pick up on is something you mentioned at the start of this, and you mentioned about the Sin-Roth pathway, which some people may have heard of, some people may have never heard of before. Could you explain sort of what that is and why that is?
Yeah, so that's something we've brought into Somerset because historically, when a child was being exploited, they would be put on a child protection plan. It would go to initial child protection conference, and exploitation would come under the category of neglect. If you're a parent that's trying to do absolutely everything to safeguard your child, and then the local authority are almost labelling you as neglecting your child, it breaks down relationships. It's really not strengths-based or empowering for the parents, and they can feel really disempowered that they're trying to do everything, but that child is now on a child protection plan. The Sin-Roth is a child in need plan, and the Roth is risk outside the home. It recognises that parents are doing everything they can to support their child, and the risk to that child is when they leave the home, whether that's online, so that risk is outside the home but online, whether that's when they're at school or out in the community. It's a really strengths-based plan. It really involves the parents, extended family. There's a specific chair that chairs those meetings, and she is amazing and really understands that process. We look at, we try to be really creative. So I know there was one family that were really worried about an exploiter knowing where they lived. The police were at that meeting, so they agreed for the next month they'd have a police car just drive up and down that street every day. They weren't going to knock on any doors, they weren't going to do anything, but it just showed that there was a presence of police in that area just as a deterrent. We look at things maybe that's a park that's maybe a certain area of concern. That's for us to look at maybe town wardens. Could we increase lighting in that area? What does that look like for that child? It includes education, how are education supporting the plan? And it's really multi-agency, but it's not damning for the family at all. It's really strengths-based, it's really empowering, and it's recognising that families are doing everything that they can to safeguard their child.
So just because a child isn't on a child protection plan doesn't mean that actually there isn't support in place, and because sometimes there's a perception of, well, child protection means that people are taking it seriously. Child in need is still serious, but not as serious. But that's not the case from what you're saying.
No, the visiting frequency for a child on a Sin-Roth plan is expected that a social worker would visit fortnightly, the same as they would if a child was on a child protection plan. We would have the reviews chaired by an independent chair, just as the same as you would for child protection. And then those reviews would have a review in terms of, as child protection, it would be a core group. But these would be Sin-Roth reviews, again, multi-agency, making sure the plan's working. We know with exploitation cases, things can change really quickly. We have to be able to acknowledge that and change the plan and adapt to always make sure that that child's being safeguarded.
Yeah, I think that's useful to understand. And I'm just thinking if somebody's listening to this thinking, oh, actually, I've got a pupil in my school. Actually, it would be great to get them on the Sin-Roth pathway. in order to have a young person on the SINROTH pathway, I'm presuming it would still be the same route as if any child or young person was going on a child protection or child in need plan, as in it would go in for assessment first?
Yeah, so it would be open for assessment, but we would, if it's clear signs of exploitation, then we would be having those discussions straight away around SINROTH to try and get that parent on board and to make that really supportive. If there's risks of exploitation, but they feel it's more of a preventative level, then we ask professionals to complete an EHA along with a CE screening tool and to submit that through the front door as they would with any other referral coming in.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I think it's useful to explain that, because sometimes people hear things like that and go, oh, that's brilliant, I've got a young person, I'll try and get them on that. But yeah, it's still the same sort of pathway as you would in terms of looking to request the involvement of children's social care, and a child and families assessment would be completed on the back of that to recommend that sort of pathway coming out from it. Unless, like you say, is that more the kind of prevention side of things, family intervention service kind of need there. Thank you. So, Alyssa, if it's okay, if I can come to you, because I know one thing that you were really, really keen to talk about today was around that trauma-informed approach in the work that you do. And I know it's something you're really passionate about, and we're keen to talk about in terms of the work of the team. So I think it's useful just to kind of explore a little bit what that means in terms of you as a team, and how you kind of use trauma-informed practice in the work that you do. Is that all right?
Yep. And it's not hard. It's just a way of working where you're actually being more open, honest, and showing empathy, compassion with the people that you're working with. So with the parents, it's talking to them on their level, and kind of letting them have that time to talk about things that have happened, and just let them have their voice and their story. And I know that the exploitation workers do that directly with the young people that they work with as well. It's about building a trusting relationship to be able to really get to the crux of what the support needs to look like for them and how they deliver that. I think most people, when they think about trauma informed, they think that there's like a list of rules and ways that you've got to do that, but it's just a way of working. It's just a way of showing that empathy and compassion, really. I think with the parents, I kind of talk to them about family life, what that looks like their jobs, talk about all those things that can be stressful as an adult, because they feel that they're to blame for what's happened to their child a lot of the time. And they feel like they're the ones that are being judged for their parenting. And that's not the case either, because it can happen to anybody. And they just feel so guilty and a lot of shame about what's happened, and they don't want people to know. So it's about kind of breaking down those barriers, because and it kind of just being a normal person and just trying to listen to them. But whilst you're doing that, you're also trying to hear what they're really saying. So what the issues that you can really work with them and make a difference to that family, because they may be used to people coming in and saying that they're going to do a lot and they're going to support them, but they've not really listened to how the family works.
So the dynamics, I guess.
The dynamics of the family, yeah, because everyone's different. And this is the thing. I go to each of my families and like the parents, and you have to think that everyone's unique in how they are as a family and how they work. So it's just about trying to find those little things, and also what their relationship is like with their child who's being that has been exploited, or even with the other siblings in the house, because this impacts on all of them. The other siblings are going to be really worried about what's happened, and they'll hear the conversations in the background. So it's about looking at that from the whole perspective of the family.
And would you say that in terms of a sort of trauma-informed approach, would you say that's something that you do, or that the whole team kind of have taken on?
I think we, as a team, we are really trying to adopt that as kind of our ethic.
Yeah, I think it's a really important value within our team that we're trauma-informed. We know when young people experience exploitation, if they're trafficked away from home, they witness extreme violence, they're living in dirty, neglectful conditions, they're having relationship breakdowns with their families, they're experiencing really high levels of trauma. And if we're not aware of that, then we're not going to be very good at our jobs. We won't be able to engage families if we're not aware of the trauma that they're sort of experiencing. I think we then see young people and parents, their only focus is then to stay safe. We think young people are being really reactive when actually they're in fight or flight. Their whole ethos in life is to keep themselves safe. And it's supporting people to really understand that, rather than seeing that they're always going missing just because they want to, or they're doing this because they want to. Grooming, a big part of grooming being so successful is that it rules young people by fear. So they're genuinely scared, and then this is transferred onto the family. The family don't know what to do. They have other children to protect. They have their own lives to protect. And if we're not aware, or we're not working trauma-informed, then we wouldn't be able to support them effectively.
And did you feel that was something that as a team, there was a conscious decision to kind of adopt as an approach? Or do you feel it just kind of made sense and just kind of happening?
I think when I took on the position, because I've only been doing that since April, May time, that was definitely part of the reason why I got the job, because of the way that I am very trauma informed in the work that I did previously. So, and I think that it kind of encouraged to look at that kind of way. We did, so there's a national charity called NWG, which stands for, I'm looking at Jo because I can never remember.
Working Group.
The National Working Group. And they had also been looking at working with parents and working with parents as partners. So I was able to speak to the lady there who does the work around the families, and kind of look at them as a guide of how I could try and put that in, as this was a new role, working with families in a way that's never done before in Somerset. And how we could incorporate that into the work that we do. So that was really useful for me as a starter, so that I could see that there was already this network of things and training that I could go to for advice around how I kind of set that up within Somerset. It's still a work in progress because, again, it's only been April, May that we started. So I kind of went head on into the supporting the parents, and then found that there was other things that also would need to be kind of looked at within schools as well. So I'm just starting to talk to some schools about going and actually doing some workshops to parents as a whole. So they wouldn't be the parents that have already been referred through our service. It would be just a general kind of parents as partners, as I keep on calling it. So that just to get that knowledge out there, because a lot of the young people that we work with and the families that we work with, the stuff's already happened. You know, they're in the exploitation. So the parents need to know these signs. They need to know all this information that I'm giving to these parents that are already involved, but they need it sooner. So I'm trying to kind of look at seeing ways that we could do that and work with other agencies to do that, especially with schools and the other provisions.
We know we have to work exploitation cases differently than any other form of abuse that children suffer. So we have to work trauma-informed, and we have to be really creative in our approach. And I think Alyssa's really demonstrating that with her being really proactive in meeting families.
So as a team, sort of how are you working to kind of sort of adopt that approach sort of across the whole team and everything that you do? Because one of the things we sort of talked about before recording this, wasn't it, that in terms of trauma-informed practice, it's not resource, it's not a tool, it's about adopting that approach in everything that you do, you know, in terms of, you know, how you structure a letter or how you talk to somebody or how you can, you know, supervision. Or so how are you kind of finding that you're kind of working to embed that across the team?
Well, we try and get together, and we've got like our little team chat, but we also try and like meet for team meetings quite regularly, and we're very open, I think, in how we talk to each other, and we're very compassionate with all of the team, really, in that we talk about stuff and you know that you've got somebody there who can support you if you are struggling with, obviously, because the stories we hear isn't very nice. So it's nice to have that backup. I think we do a lot of training. So so I've just done the NVR training.
Non-violent resistance,
sorry. I've just done the level 3 in the therapeutic skills as well, and that's kind of being pulled out to the team. So I think it's about everyone learning the skills, learning things outside, and then bringing that to the team and kind of sharing that. And we're really good at sharing and trying to help others. So I've worked with some of the other teams, so with the different workers and work with their parents so that they can see how I provide that information for parents as well, and they can see, and they've asked me information about that trauma-informed way so that they can try and embed that into the work that they do as well. So I think it's about sharing. It's quite an open team, I think.
Yeah, I think we're definitely creating a culture. If I think from a management view as well, how we're providing supervision, talking about vicarious trauma is a big part of supervision, self-care. That is a real sort of aim on our team action plan. How are we looking after ourselves? I think we talk very openly about burnout, professional burnout, and we're very conscious of that because of the high levels of risk that we're holding, and that the conversations we're having are really high-level abuse, serious youth violence and trafficking and really horrendous situations for our young people. So it's creating that supportive culture. I think even yesterday, wasn't it, one of our colleagues had been on training, so put in our team chat, hope you all have a good day. I want you to all tell me one thing you're doing today to take care of yourself. And then she said what she was doing. And then that trickled down within the team, because we're really trying to build that culture of being really self-aware.
And I think self-care if you're looking after yourself, you can kind of give that information to your parents and the young people as well, because part of the trauma-informed work is that self-care is so important as part of that, and looking after yourself and making sure that you're okay. For these parents, I always say to them, that's great, I know how worried you are, but what are you doing for yourself? And they're like, well, nothing, how can I? And I'm like, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're not looking after yourself, but that's also a really good thing for your children, not just the children that are being exploited, but the siblings, that you are trying to still make time to look after yourself and to have that time. It's really important, especially when you're dealing with such traumatic events in your life.
And obviously what we've been talking about are some very, very serious situations. And, like you say, there's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of traumatic experiences for children, young people, for parents, for yourselves working within that. I'm just thinking, are you able to kind of share any success stories at all?
So I think when we think about what good looks like, we have to think about this really differently. I think the likelihood that we're going to meet a young person who's being trafficked to London, selling crack cocaine, and then suddenly being an A-star student at school is just not often obtainable. I think one particular scenario I can think of is a young person one of our colleagues is working with. He was trafficked. To London, and then he was targeted within the local area around sort of selling substances. He then started working with our team, one of our colleagues, Connie, one of our young people's workers, and he agreed to be fitted with a buddy tag. A buddy tag is a service that we can offer through our team. It's a replica of a tag that a police officer would fit, like as if a young person was attending court and they got sentenced to wear a tag. So it's a replica, and it's a really good tool to support young people in being able to stick to a curfew and to be able to say no, because it almost takes the decision out of their hands because they're wearing this tag. This was really successful for this young person. His exploiter was basically like, we don't want anything to do with you whilst you're wearing that. You're GPS tracked and you're not going to be good for our business, and we don't want you anywhere near us. During this time, there was a lot of other sort of things identified for this young person. He ended up coming into local authority care. He was then moved with a really good foster carer. He maintained wearing that tag. That sort of moved him away from this group. He now doesn't wear the tag anymore. He's just been engaging in the music studio that is in Taunton that we can access, and he's been able to tell his story and almost use that as a bit of a therapeutic intervention, really, to share. And now this week he's gone to view his new school because he's going to be enrolled back in school, and that with all those tools in place and that consistency with that one worker, he's been able to really sort of move away from that. So I think that's been a really success story.
I think with families, obviously because the work has only just started, really, it's quite difficult. But I think I did 4 or 5 sessions with a family where the young person had been sexually exploited and still felt that they had some connection with the exploiter, and the family were really struggling with how to kind of live with their young person when they were still kind of having that contact and feeling like they needed it. And so I worked with the mum originally to give information around grooming and especially sexual exploitation. But the young person was really interested in why I was there. So they kind of came and started listening. And then it ended up with me doing some joint work with the mum and the young person around building their relationship and how they could build that. And we did that in a very creative way with mind maps and collage and just kind of buttons, all these different ways. And we did some sessions, and the young person would come down every week to see me with mum. And I would set them little tasks. So like they enjoyed going out for a little picnic and getting a little meal deal and going and doing these different things. So I would set them to do these little tasks, just the two of them. And it really built their relationship. So the mum felt more able to like have those conversations with the young person about what had happened and to be able to try and keep them safe. And the young person felt more secure at home and felt able to like go and do like a college open day, which they hadn't done, and try and think about life without the exploiter, to kind of pull it away, but not in a very exaggerate, that the young person would see. It was a very gradual and a very natural move away. And I think that's the thing. A lot of the stuff that we do, or I do with the parents, isn't necessarily a massive grand change, but for that family, all those little things that make the difference are the reason we do this job, really, I think.
It's funny, you said at the start of that, Joe, it's like, well, we need to kind of look at expectations, and actually with young people going off to London, being exploited, suddenly becoming a grade A student, what have you. To be honest, the examples that both of you just given actually is huge. And I think we can't lose sight of that, because having not had that intervention, either with the young person or with the parent, actually when you look at what could well have happened, had that intervention not been put in place. So actually, I think those outcomes are amazing when you look at them. And like you say, we shouldn't lose sight of that.
When I was talking before about what does sort of good look like, I think just to sort of give a bit of an overview of our team is that could be getting a really successful NRM for a child to make sure that the criminal justice system views them as a child and a victim.
So when you say NRM?
So it is a national referral mechanism, and it's run by the Home Office, and it's where a person is recognised as a victim of modern slavery. So if you've got a child that's being exploited and potentially, for example, that they're running drugs, but if they're being forced into doing this and threatened with violence and they're being sort of trafficked to do this, and then they get arrested with those drugs on them, if they have an NRM, then the police are going to view them as a victim more than a drug dealer. So it is really important that they are viewed as that victim. There's also safeguarding measures that are put around that. Are they going to be sort of interviewed separately, and they may be going to look at staggering the release time of if a child's been arrested with an adult. Are they going to look at contacting children's social care to make sure that they're safeguarded? So it's really important that those things are put in place to treat young people as victims. We also have interventions. I think we see a big trend with sexual exploitation, don't we? That is a lot in sort of decreasing in self-value, self-esteem. It's very entwined with potentially difficult family relationships. So then working in a really strengths-based, empowering way where young people are feeling enabled to go to college interviews and to see themselves as, recognising their own identity and getting to know themselves. They're sort of big wins for our team, really, aren't they? And then give us really good basis to build upon. And I think another big thing is education for professionals as well. I think we are a specialist team, and we're really privileged to have this specialism and be able to share our knowledge with everybody else. And I think it's a real benefit for all professionals within Somerset Council as well, because it's really difficult being a social worker and thinking you have to be an expert on everything. But to know that, like, this team is now within Somerset Council, that we're always there to support any professional discussions, strategy meetings, cross-border conversations, partner conversations. That's a real strength of our team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of sort of sharing that knowledge, just to sort of raise awareness, really. So obviously at the moment through the Safeguarding Children Partnership, we have the child exploitation training, which is done through Operation Topaz that Joe mentioned earlier, and Drula sort of running that training. But we are expanding that out because recently I've been talking to Bryony, the manager of your team, about sort of expanding that course out. One, to be a face-to-face course, but also to have Bryony or other members of the team coming in and actually talking about the work you do and also about those pathways and what they can do if they've actually got concerns. So that's going to be from April from next year. So do keep your eyes peeled on that one. And also you were talking earlier, Alyssa, about work with parents. And Drula's going to be running a regional-wide, even a Somerset regional-wide workshop for parents, which is going to be online. Again, around exploitation and helping parents to understand it better and sort of identify those signs. So do keep your eyes peeled for that as well. So thank you so much to both of you for coming in today and talking about what you do and especially for the work that you do and the rest of the team do, because it is vital. It's really important. And like I say, it is a complex and challenging area. So to have a team sort of dedicated to really engaging with young people, really understanding what's going on for them and for parents is absolutely crucial. So thank you so much. Great to see you. Great to have a conversation with you about it. And it would be great at some point to come back and have a conversation with you about sort of where things have gone in the future, if that's all right.
Amazing. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Well, take care and I'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. As always, if you'd like to find out more details on the topics discussed in today's episode, go to the SSCP website at somersetsafeguardingchildren.org.uk or by following any of the links in this episode description. Special mention today as well to one of our regular listeners to the ThePPod, Becky, for writing to us recently wanting to find out more about this subject. And if, like Becky, you enjoy listening to the ThePPod, we'd really appreciate it if you took that time to follow or subscribe to us on your chosen platform, or even better, leave us a review to let other people know about it. And be sure to let your colleagues know about this podcast and encourage them to join us here as well. It really does help to spread the word. If you have any questions or comments arising from today's episode, or would like to be involved in future episodes, we'd love you to get in touch with us at theppod@somerset.gov.uk. Once again, I'd like to give a huge thank you to my guests today, Joe Burt and Alyssa Belcher from Somerset Council's Preventing Exploitation team. And of course, I'd like to thank you for listening. My name is Steve Maccabee, and I'm the training manager for the Somerset Safeguarding Children Partnership. And I look forward to you joining us again next time at the ThePPod.
Let's work together to help keep children safe.